Welcome to the Adoption Option. I'm your host, Mike Blanchett. And for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about adopting children through foster care here in Massachusetts. With me today are two guests that work in Boston. The first person here is Ruth Bodian. She's the Family Support Services Director with M.A.R.E, which is the Adoption Resource Exchange out of Boston. And she's also an adoptive parent, like me. And also my other guest is Ricardo Franco. He's the Latino Child and Family Services Coordinator, also with M.A.R.E. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mike.
Could you tell us basically, everyone, generally when you say adoption, everyone thinks of Russia or China. Can you tell us exactly what are the different types of adoption, generally speaking, that when you talk about child adoption?
Well, there are three main types of adoption, and the type of adoption that M.A.R.E focuses on is on adoption from foster care. There's also international adoption, which are adoptions from other countries, and private domestic adoptions, which are typically of infants, an arrangement that's worked out with a...
So at M.A.R.E, you pretty much focus on adopting children that are in foster care through the state.
Yes.
And could you explain to us what M.A.R.E is and a little bit about M.A.R.E?
Well, M.A.R.E is the Massachusetts Adoption Resource Exchange, and it took me a while to understand what a resource exchange is, but pretty much it's a bridge. We are trying to put together families, kids, the DCF, the private agencies, and all the information we have, trying to match situations and to let people know what's going on. Because sometimes, you know, we have so many organizations working by the same purpose, but sometimes disconnected.
Right.
So we are kind of...
So you're like the middleman and you try to help everyone and help it run smoothly.
And also we want to outreach our communities and let people know about adoption. Things like what we're doing this morning, that's part of what M.A.R.E.
Okay, so you're kind of like a bridge between the people that are interested in adopting and DCF, which used to be called DSS. For those people, they changed, I think, a year or two ago to Department of Children and Families instead of DSS. But you guys are not an adoption agency, right?
No, we don't do the adoption process. We work closely with people who do the adoption process. But.
Could you explain briefly describe the kids that are waiting to be adopted in Massachusetts? Do you have like a ballpark number as to how many kids? Is it in the hundreds, the thousands?
And children waiting for adoptive families? About 600, I believe, is the number.
Just
we are close
in
to
Massachusetts?
In Massachusetts,
Yes, we're close to 600. And we are talking about kids, most of them between 6 and 16 years. The kids we work with are the kids that are what we call harder to place, kids that are older or with some challenges and disabilities. So we focus on and try to find a home for these kids.
Right. I know a lot of being an adoptive parent of two. I have 5 kids total, 3 biological, and the last 2 were adopted through the state of Massachusetts through foster care. And I always get approached by people that are interested in adopting. That's why I'm doing the show, to get the word out and let them know it's just not Russia, it's not China. There's several ways you can adopt, and I want to cover all the aspects of adoption. One of the things that I found is people also automatically think of thousands of dollars. You hear people that adopt, you hear it takes 20, 30, even more than that to adopt.
Thousands of dollars, but not from DCF,
If you do adopt through the state of Massachusetts a child through foster care, generally, what does it cost?
There is no cost for the adoption process. Right. There are a lot of steps that have to be taken, but there are no costs associated.
I imagine there's pros and cons to both, or all the options. So that would be something that people would have to weigh, the pros and cons, adoption through foster care versus international adoption. And
people are drawn to different kinds of adoptions, and there are different challenges and wonderful things about each of them. But yeah, a lot of people tend to not to realize that there is not a cost for adoption from foster care.
Another thing that people think of right away is everybody wants to, or most people want to adopt a baby. And they figure there's an issue of bonding, and if you adopt an older child, it might not be as easy. And something was taught to me during the MAP training class, which is a class DSS offers to people that are interested in adopting.
Yeah, it's a required part of the process to take that training program.
I'll never forget one of the things they asked. They says, in the class, everyone's interested in adopting a baby, but they told us, think back, what's your earliest memory that you can think of? And my earliest memory is age 4. I remember being in the hospital and I talked to my mother, and she described I was in the hospital, I had pneumonia, I was 4 years old. That's the earliest memory I have. So in MAP training, they told us, just think, if you adopt a kid that's 2, 3, even 4, the earliest memories people have are for age 4 or 5. So really, you can still have a really good chance to bond with that child, and they might not have any memories of anything prior.
I mean, there's so much that I could say on this topic, excuse me, but there are a lot of families who come through that are interested in really young ones, but thankfully there are a lot of families who are not only open, but they are interested in an older child, a school-age child, or even a teenager. And my personal experience is that I did adopt an older child. My son was 11 years old when he joined my family, and he's now 15, so I'm now an especially strong advocate for adopting an older child, and there is so much opportunity still to bond and have an impact on the child, and to really have a very just fulfilling parenting experience.
Right.
The other thing, Mike, is that we work for the kids. We are trying to find families for these kids instead of trying to find kids for some families.
Right.
So when we think about kids that have been in the foster care for several years, and every year they are getting older and older, and can you imagine the sense of rejection year after year when you think, well, nobody wants me, nobody really is interested in me. And when we work with these kids, 11, 12, 13, and we read about them and the struggles they have been through, but also the gifts and the desires to live and the opportunities that we have when we meet these kids. So all those kids, even though they are no babies, they are wonderful. I mean, there's a challenge also, but there is also a reward in sharing the life with these kids.
Can I just say something about that? Like, one of the things that I say to families that I work with is that looking for that right match, a child that's really compatible for your family, is so much more important than an age, and just to really try to stay open, and you know, the child or teenager that does turn out to be the right match for your family, it may be different than what you expected to end up in your family, but there's you know, a lot of focus really at looking at the compatibility and the just finding that right match for the child or teenager.
From my own personal experiences, when I was adopting, my wife and I were adopting our 2 children, I couldn't imagine the workload that the social workers have working for DCF. And it was just amazing, and I credit them for what they have to do every day. And I imagine there's going to be some people out there that maybe had kids, they're empty nesters now, that have a big house or have an extra bedroom or 2, that are thinking, gee, you know, maybe we should adopt. And I'm sure they don't want to do diapers again. I know I had 12 years of diapers straight, and we actually had a party after my last kid was potty trained.
That's actually a group that we do get a lot of interest from, and
so
they
you
are
do get a lot of older people that
the empty nesters. I mean, it's a growing a group who are getting increasing interest from, and exactly, they are often interested in the older children and teenagers.
If someone's out there that's interested in adopting, is there an age requirement?
Well, it's as long as you are 18, and yeah, that's what they.
And actually, some of the questions that I get when family calls is there a maximum age requirement? Because for some kinds of adoption, especially international adoption,
Or empty nesters, like
yeah,
you mentioned.
and there is no maximum age. Well, I guess not requirement. I guess that there's no policy against a specific age, a cutoff.
I imagine you look at the potential adoptee's health.
There's
income
a full assessment, and the age is a consideration when they're looking at matches, but there's not a specific age at which a person is considered too old to adopt.
Now, is there a particular limit or rule as far as how many children you can have in a home at one point?
It's up to 6. But that counts with your own biological, and so let's say that in your case you have 2, and you can adopt to 4 more,
right. So
or 3 and 3.
However the child or teenager became a part of your family, there's a maximum of 6.
So I have
under
I
18.
have 3 biological children myself. I have 2 adoptees.
And you could have 1 more.
So we could have 1 more.
Yeah.
Diane, did you hear that? Where's the camera? She'll shoot me.
We brought the forms for you.
Income requirements. Is there any income requirements or
Well, the guideline is that as long as the family can prove that the income is regular and is enough to support the family, we are not looking for, I mean, the DCF is not looking for the richest people in the state, but people who can, on regular basis, provide for themselves and for the kids.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think that's a misconception that's out there, and probably related to the high cost that family they hear about different kinds of adoption. So, yeah, there's, as Ricardo mentioned, there does need to be a steady either source of income or assistance coming through the home.
Very good. I'm being told we have to pause for a commercial. Don't go away. We'll be right back after a public address announcement. Come back, we'll be here.
I remember how much you said you liked mine. Oh.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of siblings in foster care who'll take you just as you are.
When I need you, I just close my eyes and I'm with you. And all that I so wanna give you, it's only a
You don't have to be a hero to be a hero. When you adopt a child from foster care, just being there makes all the difference.
Welcome back to the Adoption Option. Again, I'm Mike Blanchett, your host, and here with me again is Ruth Bodian and Ricardo Franco, both from M.A.R.E, the Mass Adoption Resource Exchange out of Boston. And before the break, we were talking about various requirements people need to have if they're interested in adopting through foster care. And right before the break, we had talked about income requirements. You basically said as long as you have a steady income, and pretty much if you can make ends meet, that's the requirement, right? Here's a requirement: citizenship. Do you have to have a U.S. citizenship to adopt?
I'm so glad that you asked that, Mike, because there's a lot of families in the Latino communities with the big question about you have to be a U.S. citizen, and the answer is no. As long as you are a legal resident in the United States, you can be an adoptive father.
Interesting. Very good. That opens that opens the door to a lot of people being able to adopt it, but they don't even realize that.
No. Yes.
And one big myth I've always heard that was also discussed at my parent training when my wife and I attended at the MAP training was you have to be a married couple to adopt. Can we clarify that?
Yeah, no, that's not the case. Any family constellation is eligible to adopt. I'm a single adoptive parent, so a single adoptive woman. We have a lot of single adoptive fathers as well. Traditional couples, non-traditional couples, 2 women and 2 men, they're all eligible to adopt, so any constellation.
So that is a myth.
Yes.
Okay. could we get into a little bit to the process, the general process that would involve, say I'm going to adopt again, or I'm adopting for the first time. What would be the first thing? Would it be wise to, say, call you at M.A.R.E. and say, hey, I'm interested in adopting a child or children? Because I don't think people understand, you do have some sibling groups.
Yes, absolutely.
If I'm not mistaken,
yeah,
right?
sibling groups.
Especially for some of those groups, it's really important. The social workers think that are really important for them to stick together. So that's another option for people.
Right. Before I forget, before I leave the show today, I'm going to mention your website and your phone number. If you guys get a chance out there, check out their website. You actually have a photo listing of all the kids legally free.
Yeah. Some of them. It's not comprehensive.
You have a list of a photo listing and a little biography and pictures of some of the kids that are legally free for adoption. I check it like every week. It's amazing. And while we're on the subject, and another thing that most people don't know, and you guys sponsor what's called the M.A.R.E. book, or you have what's called the M.A.R.E. book. It's a photo listing of kids that are legally free.
Well, in the book there are both children that are legally free and at risk. Online is limited to legally free children, and in the book we have pictures and descriptions.
So there's both.
Yeah, and the legal risk it refers to children that are not yet legally free for adoption. So the court process is underway, but the judge has not yet terminated parental rights.
Now, this book is available at many libraries across the state.
All of the libraries.
All the libraries.
All
and it's
libraries.
updated frequently, correct?
Yep, updated monthly.
And we do have one at Nevin's Library here in Methuen. And I quite often, I'll bring my children there. They'll go down in the children's section. I'll go up and I'll grab the M.A.R.E. loose leaf binder. And each page is one child in the binder. And it gives a photograph of the child and a little biography, if they're free for adoption or not, what they like to do.
And we have pages in English and in Spanish.
Spanish, yeah.
Well.
Excellent, excellent.
With the name, a little bit about what they think about themselves, the kids, and what people say about them.
Right.
And yeah.
And word of advice, bring some tissues with you. You're going to need them.
Do you want to show
I'm
the
not
cover
afraid to say
so I
that.
can see it?
Yes.
And if all you have to do is go to the reference section,
Yep.
right? Ask the librarian for the M.A.R.E. loose leaf binder, and if you have some free moments, look at it. And it's a quite amazing thing to see. And you can that's a good idea. I see it's pretty thick. Those are all children waiting to be adopted, waiting for a forever family and home, right?
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
Do you want to get back to the adoption process? We started mentioning that. Do you want me to speak a little bit about the process?
Sure, yeah, if you could.
Yeah. A great first step is to contact us, to call M.A.R.E., and we'd be happy to speak with people about the steps in the process and help connect families to an agency to work with. Families can work either with one of the offices of the Department of Children and Family, or there's also contracted agencies such as Cambridge Family and Children's Services, Child and Family Services, agencies like that who are contracted by DCF to do the adoption process. So a family would contact one of those agencies, get an application. There's frequently a home visit where the worker would come out to answer questions the family might have and do a safety, just a check just to see that the home meets basic safety guidelines and standards.
Like fire extinguishers, plug covers.
They look at, I mean, it's an initial kind of check. It gets a little more detailed later in the process, but like that there's the space, a room with adequate
I see.
space.
Okay, yeah, enough beds and room.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they don't need to have the bed available at this point, but they need the room. The room, yeah. And then the family would have, all the members of the family would have a CORE check run on them, Child Protective Service check. So they run these checks on everyone ages 14 and over who's a household member. When everything clears, they're invited to a MAP class. There is a process of getting a waiver if there is a charge that comes up on a CORE. I think there's another misconception. People may assume that they aren't eligible if they do have some charge on the CORE, but there is a waiver process where families are able to kind of give an explanation about what happened, and there is a review of where they are
So in other words,
current
they could have,
situation.
when they were younger,
Exactly,
young
something
and
could have
crazy, it
happened
might
there.
be something minor on there, and they might think that they don't qualify,
Right,
but they still might.
Yeah, and whatever the charge is, it's worth asking because it is something that is possible.
And sometimes people don't understand why DCF is so clear in this, but we have to understand, people have to understand that these kids, many of these children come from families in which they have been suffer abuse and violence and challenges.
Sometimes
so the
they-
last thing we want to is just to, let these kids go to another situation. That's why
Where it could happen again.
Yeah, so what we want to be
Right.
sure that they are going to be safe.
Right. How long does the whole process take? Say someone from start to finish, say they're interested. I know it varies case to case. There's a lot of variables involved. How long, just a ballpark?
As a real big ballpark, general ballpark, we say between a year or two from starting the process to having a child or teenager placed in your home. Because after the training program, the MAP class, which lasts about 8 to 10 weeks, there's a home
Right.
study process where the social worker will visit the home a few times, talk to members of your family. There's different information that they
Right.
collect and put together this written document about 10, pretty, help to really give enough information about the family to help the social workers
Right.
decide on who the right match for that family would be.
Right.
then
And
once-
that's, from what I understand, you guys also hold events,
yes,
which
exactly.
which aid the social workers and also the adoptive,
Yes.
potential adoptive families too.
that's I would
adoption
say,
parties
yeah.
and
Yeah.
in which I'm a volunteer
Yeah.
quite a bit with M.A.R.E. as I'm part of the mentor group over there, and we just had the fantastic adoption party at Jordan's
I bet
Furniture in
yours,
Reading.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
That
we
was
hold,
excellent.
I would say maybe 12, 14 adoption parties a year, every year. And for me, even working that is one of the best times because you see families that have been going through the whole process and now they are meeting the kids and having time to play with them, to interact with them. Social workers are there so you can ask questions. And so it's an excellent opportunity to...
And I noticed some people also bring their biological kids
Yes,
or
yeah.
kids they've already adopted
Yeah.
because you can adopt more than one child.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they get a chance to play with the potential
And
adoptee
the
also.
majority of our events are open to families at all stages of the adoption process. So for a lot of families, it's the first step they take is they come to one of these events and go to a workshop that we have about the process and speak to social workers and experienced adoptive parents. So again, if you contact us at M.A.R.E, we can get you on our mailing list and let families know when there is an event coming up that they
Excellent.
would be welcome to attend.
You mentioned legal status before. There's different types of legal status. Is there like can you explain that just a little more?
Well, pretty much the two statuses are legal risk and legally free for adoption. So as I mentioned a little bit before, once the termination of parental rights trial has been completed, the child is legally free to be adopted. Otherwise, if it's still pending, it's considered a legal risk. And a child or teenagers may be placed in a pre-adoptive home before the termination is completed. There's a lot of effort to get the child settled in a permanent living situation as soon as possible, and the risk being that the child or teen may end up being returned to the biological family.
Okay.
And that's all information that is provided to the family, and the family is able to decide if this is a situation they are
So
comfortable
they can
with.
decide, right, so they can decide if they want someone just totally free for adoption, there's no
Right.
legal risk of returning the
Right.
child,
And one-
or some legal risk.
I mean, one thing that's important for families to know is that for the younger children, and younger meaning 0 to 5, the majority are legal risk of that age group.
One thing I want to touch upon too is I noticed there's some people or some children that require to have a continued relationship with either siblings or a birth mother or father, or in some cases they like to keep in touch with some past foster parents. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's very, yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah, there's always a kind of agreement between the adoptive family and the Department of Children and Families, that for some of these kids, really, those kinds of relationships are really meaningful, and we don't want to disconnect them 100%, and especially biological siblings. And it's really important for them to keep in touch twice a year. But every case is different, and the social workers, and they will talk with the families. And
I imagine that would be something that it would have to fit with the pre-adoptive parents too. Would they be able to do that?
Well,
Do they have a choice of an open adoption
right.
versus a closed adoption?
If there's, the choice they have is whether or not they're comfortable with an open adoption. So the decision is made through the court process and what's in the best interest of the child. And so similar to kind of age group or legal status, an adoptive family can decide whether or not they are open to being matched with a child or teenager who does have an open adoption agreement for contact. This could be a whole show, this topic. There's a lot of discomfort that a lot of families have with this idea. It really is a wonderful opportunity. I say it's really the best gift an adoptive family can give to a child. You know, again, in this brief amount of time, you know, the contact can be, sometimes it can be letters, it can be visits. You know, obviously safety and the best interest of the child are the priorities when these decisions are being made. But, you know, a lot of families have a lot of questions about this, and I'm happy to talk more about it back at M.A.R.E.
Okay. You are right, there's a lot to this.
Yeah,
but I think we covered a lot today. I'm told we're running out of time. Before we go, I do want to mention M.A.R.E.'s phone number. It's the Massachusetts Adoption Resource Exchange. Say that 3 times quick. Their phone number, if you have any questions or concerns, 617-542-3678. I believe it's going to be on the credits at the end of the show as well. And your website is www.mareinc.org. Once again, they have a photo listing of a few of the children available for adoption and a little biography, as well as the history of M.A.R.E., what they're about, their history in Boston and serving the Massachusetts region. I want to thank both of you, Ruth Bodian and Ricardo Franco of M.A.R.E. Thank you very much. Will you come back again?
I'd be happy to.
I would love to have you both. That was great. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for watching The Adoption Option. And remember, adoption is always an option. See you next time. I'm Mike Blanchett.